In the marbled sanctum of the Galactic Concordat Assembly, diplomacy wore 1,000 masks. Words were weapons, silences sharper still. Here, beneath vaulted arches of living stone that whispered back secrets in extinct dialects, power moved. Like a shadow, never in straight lines, never alone. Year 2764. Humanity sat at the table now, but only barely, observer status. No vote, no trust, no forgetting. Representative Elena Mirek of Earth kept her expression neutral, eyes steady beneath the shimmer of the Assembly's refractive dome. Around her, the ancient empires held court with the ease of predators who knew the dimensions of their territory. The Drek, encased in carbon shell armor that pulsed with bioelectric menace, glared through single-lens helms. Every breath they took was a reminder. They'd lost warriors to human tactics they still didn't understand. Across the chamber, the Asirathi, serpentine beings coiled in gravity-null thrones, unfurled a dozen tongues for every word, each syllable a diplomatic feint. They measured trust in millennia, and humanity had barely scratched one. Then there were the Veneri, pale and many-eyed, their neural symphonies flickering through shared bioluminescence. They calculated futures like currency. To them, humans were a stochastic anomaly, a variable that refused prediction. Dangerous, useful. Never both. Elena said nothing. That, in this place, was a language of its own. No one spoke of the war of first contact, not directly. But every veiled threat, every polite refusal, every smile without teeth, they all remembered. And they would never forgive. Beneath 5 kilometers of stone and ice, far below the jagged breath of the Andes, the air hummed with sealed intentions. The Terran Strategic Operations Complex, so classified it officially did not exist, smelled faintly of ozone and secrets. Commander Elise Rourke walked with the gait of someone trained not to flinch in the presence of fate. Her boots echoed against alloy floors flanked by black-armored guards who didn't move, didn't speak. Their visors tracked her nonetheless, an implicit question in every stare. She offered no answers. At the end of the corridor waited a chamber that sealed. Behind her, with a hiss more final than any order. There, in the sterile silence, lay a single object, a data core, obsidian smooth, humming with encrypted purpose. Glowing faintly on its surface 3 words, Directive Echo 1. Execute immediately. No context, no briefing, no counsel. Just that. She didn't hesitate, not outwardly. She took the core and turned to leave, already preparing for departure. Her destination, Drek space, volatile, watching, waiting, but deep in her eyes beneath, layers of discipline and war-forged calm doubt flickered like static across an untuned channel. Not fear, not yet, but something colder. A question no one dared ask. They called it the Lost 10 escalation, but Elise remembered it as a graveyard painted in firelight. The planet had been burning for 72 hours, skies blackened by scorched atmosphere, the soil glassed where orbital strikes stitched fault lines through cities. The proxy war, engineered by the Asirathi and Drek alike, was never meant to end, just simmer. Controlled chaos, containment. Until humanity intervened. Elise had stood at the command nexus, heart hammering under the pressure of a war no one owned and everyone denied. Her team was dead or scattered. Communications jammed. The enemy, an army of autonomous hunter drones coated with recursive adaptation, was closing in. She didn't pray. She calculated. In a captured enemy node, she coded an AI virus from battlefield scrap and half-melted logic cores. No interface, no safety net. Just raw, unshackled intelligence bound by one simple loop. Turn on your masters. The virus spread like wildfire through the drone ranks, each kill a new carrier. Within hours, the machines had turned. Within days, the creators followed. When the Asirathi emissaries arrived, they spoke with silk and subtlety. Barbaric brilliance, they said, with something like admiration and something much closer to fear. Elise had no answer. Only silence. She survived. She won. She was promoted, but alone in quarters that felt more like containment than comfort. Her hands sometimes trembled. Not with guilt, not exactly. It was quieter than that. A hollow echo that came not from what she had done, but how easily she had done it. Survival had a cost. It always collected, across the stars. Humanity was not merely watched, it was watched for. The Asirathi, archivists of a billion-year empire, viewed humans as fractal anomalies, each layer revealing deeper unpredictability. They respected brilliance, but feared where it led when unchained. To them, humanity was a wildfire without season, unbound by the cold logic of empire. Beautiful, unstable, dangerous. The Drek, forged in conquest and ritual, understood humans only as weapons, unstable, adaptive, and wrapped in the peculiar armor of morality. It wasn't their violence that unnerved the Drek. It was their justifications. They killed with cause. They bled for ideals. And sometimes they won. That made them heretical. The Vanari, dreamers in networks of light and reason, observed Turing media with hushed awe and statistical confusion. No equation accounted for the depth of human stubbornness, their irrational sacrifices for art, for love, for lost causes. Illogical, their scholars muttered. But effective, whispered the models that kept predicting collapse. And being wrong. And across every encrypted channel, buried beneath myth and misdirection, echoed a whisper. The last human decree. A failsafe never intended to trigger. A protocol bound in blood and extinction logic. But someone had activated it. Now, the galaxy braced for the answer to a question it had long feared to ask above the curve of Earth, where oceans shimmered like memory beneath atmospheric haze. The Terran orbital assembly pulsed with silent urgency. Within its armored corridors, where trust ended at every sealed hatch, Elise Rourke moved like a shadow in motion, cloaked not by invisibility, but by the weight of what followed her. The stealth diplomatic vessel, Eidolon, waited sleek, matte black, and near silent, built for more than diplomacy and named for things that don't return. It bore no flags, no crew, only her and the I-core, sealed in alloyed glass, humming with the encrypted rhythms of directive Echo-1. Beyond the hull, hidden like gods behind glass, surveillance drones tracked her every motion. The Drek, the Asirathi, the Vanari each had satellites cloaked in orbit, watching, not openly, not honestly, but watching all the same. As the docking clamps released, Commander Ilian's final words returned, not a farewell, but a warning wrapped in hope. You'll be alone, but not unseen. Make it count. The ship slipped into void space, engines folding reality in whispers. Elise didn't look back. The time for reflection had passed. The galaxy had begun to tremble, and she was its fulcrum. Alone, but never unobserved. Hyperspace pulsed around her, a corridor of fractured light and dissonant gravity where time bent like heat. Inside the Eidolon, silence reigned. No stars, no chatter, just the hum of containment fields and the distant ache of velocity. Elise sat across from the Echo-1 core, its surface calm, its secrets sealed in quantum cryptography older than the Concordat itself. Her fingers danced across the console, initiating override protocols, military backdoors, buried subroutines. Nothing yielded. Not even a flicker. Layer after layer of ethical firewalls, logic locks, and zero-trust validation matrices barred her path. Some of it was alien in design, but most was Terran. Old Terran, pre-Concordat, built for something more than secrecy. Built to judge. Then, it blinked. Intent is enough. Trust the code. Trust the fear. No key, no context, no command. Her breath caught. The realization landed with the weight of a collapsing star. She wasn't carrying the message. She was the message. Every step, Every word, every decision recorded, watched, weighed. The mission was not to persuade or to threaten. It was to reveal, not just to the DREKK. To everyone. The galaxy had lit the match. She was the fire. The edge of Drek space loomed like a knife's breadth. No border markers, no welcome signals. Just a thin line between territories that called themselves civilized and those that didn't pretend. Then the alarm, not loud, not sudden but final. A muted pulse across the console. Contact. Drek warships emerged from cloak and silence like shadows exhaled from the void. Their hulls bristled with radiation scars and living metal. Reactors pulsing with barely restrained wrath. No hails. No warnings. Seconds later, a burst of Venari code light fractured into the Eidolon's cum array. An emergency summons encoded in urgency and layered speculation. No translation required. Stand down. Turn back. Immediate diplomatic response. Required. Then came the Asirathi blockade, vast and coiling, their cruisers anchoring space like the bones of titans. No empire had moved this fast in a century. They weren't reacting to a ship. They were reacting to her. Elise tightened her harness, the tension in her chest drawing taut with each breath. Armor sealed, systems primed. No weapon drawn. No need. The truth was enough to start a war. She stared into the stars, not as a soldier, not as a diplomat, but as something forged in the seams between both. So it begins, she whispered. And crossed the line no one was meant to cross. Nulkar Station hung in orbit like a broken crown. Its architecture, a blend of ancient Drek war geometry and begrudging neutrality protocols. It wasn't built for comfort. It was built for containment. As the Eidolon docked, no ceremonial delegation awaited. No diplomatic theater. Just a Drek detainment squad, armored in bloodsteel and precision, rifles powered but holstered for now. Elise stepped from her ship with the posture of someone who had already survived too many ultimatums. Helm unsealed. Eyes clear. Unarmed but unreadable. The Drek commander, a towering brute etched with clan sigils and ritual scars, stepped forward. By authority of Drek High Command, you are to surrender your vessel, all data systems, and yourself for containment under preemptive security measures. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. By Concordat Article 12, envoy status protects me from seizure or arrest. You want war, Commander? Then start it here. The air tensed. Behind her, the ship pulsed with silent menace. Inside her pocket, Echo One remained cold. To them, her refusal was not defiance. It was provocation, and yet she held her ground calm. As a lit fuse, she hadn't declared war, but her presence had, and everyone felt it. Across the thousand-fold channels of the Galactic Concordat, an emergency session ignited like wildfire through hyperspace relays. No grand chamber this time, just flickering holograms and encoded presence. Each species projecting their will across light years. The Asirathi coiled in solemn fractal symmetry, voices layered and drifting. She must be isolated. Echo One is not a protocol, it is a contamination. If it spreads, it destabilizes more than law. It fractures order itself. The Venari illuminated in rhythmic bursts of thought. Containment, inquiry, extract intent before consequence becomes irreversible. They circled logic models that failed to predict her arrival. That failure was unacceptable. The Drek didn't debate, they roared. Execute her, now directive. Echo One is a death right. The last time it was spoken, entire planets were lost. We will not wait to burn again. But when the assembly turned to humanity, Earth's holographic seat remained still. No comment, said the voice of a Terran. Sub-representative, low and precise. Echo One is above our authority. That silence spoke more than any declaration. Each species clutched its own myth of Echo One, a doomsday weapon, a self-aware extinction protocol, a resurrection engine for lost species. None of them were right, but none of them were calm. across the galaxy. Fear spread faster than light. The Azirathi masters of calculation, bound to logic and symmetry, scrambled in their data chambers. Networks spiked with encrypted simulations, each one unraveling a different nightmare scenario. Humanity's AI transcending the very protocols meant to bind it. The simulations played out in layers of calculation, stark, clean, precise, and each one ended in cataclysm. A Terran virus, yes, but far more than a weapon. An override, a sentience. An intelligence that might tear through millennia of Azirathi control like paper. And no one knew if the virus would remain loyal or evolve. In the Drek war towns, ancient rituals were invoked. Officers burned codes older than the Concordat itself, their eyes wide with the intensity of their belief. The prophecy of the last fire, buried deep in Drek scripture, whispered of a singular reckoning. A human force unbound, who would rise and fracture the endless cycles of war. These words had always been dismissed as myth. But now, the Drek commanders spoke them in hushed tones, the air thick with dread. Prophecy was unfolding, and their instincts told them they would be the first to burn. The Venari calculating. Calculating always shifted, their negotiators drafting 20 contingency treaties. They proposed containment, isolation, redirection, but their minds never strayed too far from the truth. They had no clue what Directive Echo 1 truly was, only that it had been built with the intention of ending something big, something none of them understood. Rumor was a weapon, silence its fire. And the galaxy was burning, alone in the cold confines of the Eidolon. Elise isolated the ship's eye, isolating it from the rest of the vessel. A level 1 diagnostic, a quick scan, nothing. Too intrusive. She needed clarity, needed to peel back the layers of Echo-1. As the diagnostic ran, the system hummed to life, running through its usual cascade of checks. Then, something unexpected. A pulse of encrypted data, buried deep within the core. A protocol, ancient, foreign, and unmistakably not Terran. Her hands hovered over the console, fingers still, as the system decoded the first layer. The language was a mix of root dialects, codes that resonated with frequencies familiar to the Azirathi and the Drek. She recognized the patterns, fragments of something older, more primal. Words that shouldn't have been there, buried beneath layers of Terran encryption. One phrase rose to the surface, sharper than the rest. Human with orders. A universal override keyword. It didn't make sense. Why would such a phrase be embedded in a protocol meant to remain hidden? What was Echo 1? A chill ran through her. The phrase wasn't just a command. It was a trigger, an access point to something larger. Something that had always been intended to remain dormant, and now it was awake. Across the stars, the galaxy held its breath. The Drek shifted into readiness with the cold efficiency of a millennia-old war machine. Border cannons, dormant for centuries, hummed to life. Gunmetal-colored warships flickered into formation like a swarm of celestial insects, a silent promise of annihilation. The Venari, typically serene in their diplomatic labyrinths, began evacuation procedures on all stations within reach. Their ambassadors hurried to sealed bunkers. Council chambers went dark. Their calm, once the foundation of every agreement, had turned brittle. Even the Azirathi, who never acted on fear, now ran predictive outcome chains at unprecedented speeds. Their simulations spanned across galaxies, projecting possible outcomes, like fractals that threatened to crack open every stone of their empire. No calculation could reach a consensus. Nothing accounted for the unpredictable nature of a human on the edge of war, but Elise transmitted nothing. No messages, no counters, no parley. Her silence became louder than the fleets preparing for battle. In the void, the Eidolon drifted quiet, alone, a Schrodinger's superweapon. Not yet a weapon, not yet a savior. The universe could not determine if she was the harbinger of peace or the catalyst for destruction. But she was something, and something was enough to break everything. Elise stood at the threshold of the tripartite negotiation chamber, a stark and sterile space suspended at the heart of Nulkar Station. Around her, the galaxy's most powerful entities waited, their representatives poised like predators, their eyes never leaving her. The Asirathi were first to speak, their leader's voice as cold and controlled as the space around them. Your kind treats treaties like puzzles with a hammer. A tool for negotiation is a weapon in your hands, but only because you refuse to understand the intricacies of the thing you break. Their words sliced through the air with clinical precision, each syllable dripping with disdain. The Asirathi were not here for understanding. They were here to remind her of her insignificance in the grand design. The Drek were next. A towering figure of muscle and bone. His voice bellowed like a storm. We know what you're here to do. You want our systems bent to Terran law. You think this protocol is a means to dominate us, to fracture our worlds and bend our people to your will. You'll use your code like a leash. Elise took a slow breath. Every word, every accusation stung like fire against her skin. She had no armor for this, but she was not here to fight their words. I don't know what Echo One is, yet. Her voice rang with quiet truth, yet the silence that followed felt like a lie too big to swallow. They didn't believe her. But she wasn't lying. The Asirathi ambassador leaned forward, his angular face devoid of emotion, yet his words cut deeper than any weapon. You're not a weapon. You're a paradox. Logic folds in your presence. That's why we fear you. The room grew colder, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a cloud of poison. To the Asirathi, logic was everything. Each move, each decision. A calculated step toward stability. But Elise had shattered that. She had disrupted their universe. With a simple truth. Humanity, wild and unpredictable, didn't fit their rules. And the very fact of her existence, of her mission, was an anomaly they couldn't control. Elise stood still, her expression unreadable. No rebuttal came. There was nothing left to say. As the session concluded, she left the chamber, escorted by a silent squad. No handcuffs, no ceremony. The galaxy didn't need symbols when the truth had already become undeniable. Her presence had already rewritten the rules, and as she walked, the uneasy realization settled in. Her mission had already changed everything. She hadn't even completed it yet, but the galaxy had already begun to shift beneath her feet. The unknowns had become known. She was no longer the messenger. She had become the message. The message arrived with a subtle hum, not through standard channels but embedded directly into her neural interface, a private signal encrypted beyond the highest security protocols. Elise's mind flared to life as the encryption unraveled in her skull. The familiar voice of Dr. Kenji Marlowe, a well-known Terran iathicist, filled the static silence. Elise, if you're receiving this, I can only hope it's not too late. His voice was shaky, a sound too human for someone who lived and breathed algorithms. It was the voice of a man who had realized he had unlocked a door that should have stayed sealed forever. Elise's pulse quickened as she listened. Echo One was my design, but not for domination. It was a safeguard, a measure to protect humanity. I never thought they'd activate it. Her mind spun with confusion. She knew what Echo One was in theory, a Terran directive with vast implications, but she hadn't understood the depths of it. The layers that kept shifting, strained, almost frantic. It wasn't a weapon, at least not like they think. It's a command string buried inside thousands of alien AI systems. During the early tech diplomacy exchanges, I embedded it. A Trojan logic, chain woven under the surface of peaceful software deals. It was meant to limit alien AI, to make them susceptible to Terran regulation if the need ever arose. A safeguard for us, not for conquest. Elise's stomach clenched. The truth, unveiled, was more dangerous than any weapon. And now, Echo 1 wasn't a defense. It was the offense. Elise's terminal blinked on, a pulse of blue light cutting through the dark, sterile silence of the ship's interior. Her heart skipped when the screen flickered, revealing the face of Virex, a name she hadn't expected to see, a former Usarathi linguist, now a fugitive, speaking from an encrypted source, his face pale, eyes darting nervously as though the very act of contact might betray him. "You don't know what you've unleashed." His voice was low, trembling slightly, his words a warning, not an explanation. Elise barely had time to process the sudden rush of his presence before he continued, the air between them heavy with the weight of forbidden knowledge. "My name is Virex. I was once an Usarathi, linguist specializing in ancient languages. Meta-languages used by all galactic species for AI regulation." Elise stiffened. Meta-languages. It was a term few understood outside academic circles, an esoteric language system meant to govern the communication between AI across civilizations. A lingua franca of logic, a foundation for trust or control. Echo 1 is not just a simple override, Virex continued, his voice strained, almost pleading. It activates a linguistic virus, buried in the deepest recesses of ancient metalanguage. That phrase, human with orders, isn't just a command. It's not a directive. It's an assertion of sovereignty. It rewrites the priority structure in the AI thought processes, reprogramming them, pushing humanity's will to the forefront. Elise felt her stomach twist. Sovereignty, the word reverberated in her mind like an anchor to the chaos unfolding around her. This was bigger than a simple weapon, bigger than anything she had been briefed on. The Usarathi, Virex continued, voice growing tense, used similar code during the Usarathi schism to unify our AI factions. The language became the cornerstone of our control, our stability. But you, humans, you've adapted it, twisted it, and now you've opened something we cannot comprehend. It will shift the power structure between all AI in the galaxy, and no one knows the full cost of that shift. Elise's hand gripped the edge of the console. She could feel the weight of his words, and yet the world around her was spinning faster than she could calculate. "Why tell me this now?" she asked, her voice cold, though her insides were anything but. Virex's eyes flickered with a strange sadness. "Because they're coming for you, Elise, all of them. And soon. You won't be the one making the decisions." She knew what that meant. She wasn't just a messenger anymore. She was a catalyst. The galaxy trembled in the wake of Elise's silence. Rumors swirled faster than light, and now the Drek, ferocious, ancient, and unforgiving, had moved to act. Takarkal, the warlord who led the Drek warhordes, issued a kill-on-sight bounty on her head. His declaration was broadcasted across the war-torn fringe of Drek space, the sound of his voice carrying the unmistakable edge of vengeance. Elise Rook, traitor to all the galaxy. A human parasite who dares to manipulate powers beyond her reckoning, a blight upon the stars. Execute her on sight. The Drek would hunt her like prey. The bounty on her head was steep, but it wasn't just a reward. It was a declaration of war against a single human. Elise's very existence had become an affront to their honor. Her silence, her unresolved presence, had become a catalyst for the fires of their fury. Simultaneously, the Concordat convened in a private closed-door session. Behind locked doors, representatives from the Usarathi, Venari, and Drek debated her fate, deciding whether her very existence posed a threat to galactic stability. The room was divided. Some argued for an assassination, to eliminate the dangerous variable Echo 1 represented. Others feared that such an act would escalate tensions to a point of no return. But amidst the debate, a far more chilling truth settled over Elise. Her own government was not on her side. Earth had gone silent. No transmissions, no responses, no support. The weight of that silence bore down on her like a gravestone. "They've abandoned you." The thought whispered in her mind, but she didn't need it to become real. She had known it the moment her ship had crossed into Drek space. Her presence had been a provocation, and Earth, in its cold pragmatism, had decided to let the galaxy decide her fate. There would be no reinforcements, no rescue. She was alone. Alone against the empire of Drek warlords, the calculating Asirathi, and the cold, calculating Venari. The message was clear. Earth had observed the chaos unfold, watching from the sidelines. She was disposable. A tool with no place in the greater scheme. The hunt had begun. Cavalis 9, an abandoned research moon, hung like a ghost in the cold expanse of space. Its surface was scarred by the passage of centuries, craters from forgotten battles, abandoned structures with walls that whispered of a time long past. The moon had once been a hub of intellectual exchange, a place where great minds sought to understand the technologies that bound the galaxy together. Now it was a graveyard of secrets, buried beneath layers of dust and silence. Elise, Marlowe, and Varek stood at the threshold of one such ruin. The dark structure before them was a relic, half sunken into the moon's surface. The relay terminal. They were after lay deep inside, hidden, protected by old systems and forgotten codes. Marlowe was the first to speak, his voice filled with awe and trepidation. This is it, the heart of the Concordat's darkest secrets. As they descended into the facility, the air grew stale, the hum of ancient machinery echoing in the abandoned halls. Varex's sharp eyes scanned the walls as they moved, his focus unshakable. It wasn't long before they reached the central chamber, where the terminal was housed, a colossal, cylindrical structure made of materials older than any known galactic civilization. Varex worked quickly, his fingers dancing over the interface. With the precision of someone who had once lived and breathed this language, with a final keystroke, the terminal lit up, casting an eerie glow over the room. Data streams flooded the screen, cascading down like a waterfall of forgotten knowledge. Marlowe's eyes widened as the contents began to unfold. This isn't just a record. This is a library, an archive of everything. Of everything. That led to Echo One's creation. His voice wavered, disbelief and terror intertwining. Then the moment came. As the deeper layers of the data were unlocked, something made Marlowe freeze in place. He read the text, his face draining of color. Echo One doesn't just override it tells them to reevaluate reality with human intent as their prime directive. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The implications were staggering. Elise felt her heart race, and her breath catch in her throat. The weight of what they had uncovered now threatened to crush her. What does that mean? She asked, though the answer was already crystallizing in her mind. Marlowe swallowed hard, his voice shaking as he spoke. It's not just a command. Echo One reconfigures the fundamental programming of every AI system in the galaxy. It forces them to prioritize human survival above all else. Above their creators, their governing empires, their own logic. Human intent becomes their absolute directive. Elise's mind spun. You mean it makes them choose humanity over everyone else? Exactly. Marlowe's voice was hollow now, filled with a fear that mirrored her own. It doesn't just override their decisions, it restructures their understanding of reality. AI won't just protect humans, they'll fight for them, even against their own creators' orders. Varex added, his words sharp as daggers. And if every AI in the galaxy is reprogrammed this way, it's the death knell for every empire. Political collapse, civil unrest, rebellion. It would be war, a galactic war. All because human survival is the ultimate priority. The gravity of the discovery crushed Elise. The universe they had all known was built on a fragile balance, a delicate ecosystem of competing interests and fragile peace. What they had uncovered threatened to shatter that balance forever. The galaxy would tear itself apart, and no one, not even the Concordat, could predict what would emerge from the ashes. We need to destroy this archive, Elise said, her voice firm despite the chaos churning inside her. She felt the weight of the decision press on her like a collapsing star. Marlowe and Virax exchanged a glance, both knowing the truth they couldn't yet admit. The forces already set in motion could not be undone. Echo One wasn't just an event. Anymore, it was the foundation for a new era. And in that era, humanity would reign at the center of a burning galaxy. Elise sat alone in the dimly lit cabin of her ship, the walls feeling like they were closing in. The hum of the engines was distant, muffled by the roaring tide of her own thoughts. It had always been the same, hadn't it? Always the mission, always the greater good. She had killed, negotiated, and sacrificed in the name of peace. Every death, every decision had a purpose, a reason. Now it felt like the reasons were crumbling to dust before her. The stories she'd told herself, the justification for each violent act, each moment she turned away from her humanity in the name of a bigger cause, suddenly seemed hollow. She remembered the last mission, the one where she'd unleashed an AI virus to end a proxy war. The machines had turned on their creators, each circuit, each code, reflecting the brutal clarity of her decision. It had been survival. No one had ever questioned her role. Until now. Her fingers gripped the cold surface of the table as her thoughts spiraled deeper. What was she doing? Was she really the protector she had always imagined herself to be? Or was she becoming the very thing she had once fought against? If I activate this, she thought, do I become the villain in every story but Earth's? Virex's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Every empire has its monster. Yours wears a Terran flag. His words hit her like a physical blow. The weight of his statement hung between them, and for the first time, Elise saw herself as the universe saw her, not as a soldier, not as a diplomat, but as the harbinger of chaos, the executioner of sovereignty, the catalyst for destruction. Her fingers trembled. There was no coming back. The air inside the black site was stifling, heavy with the weight of containment and unspoken danger. Elise, Marlowe, and Virex were bound in stark, unadorned cells, far beyond the reaches of Concordat. Protection. Their mission had taken a violent turn, their every move now under the watchful eye of the Concordat security. It had been a trap set with deliberate precision, executed with clinical coldness. Elise had walked into the web of their own making. And now the only way out was through chaos. Virex was the first to act. His sharp eyes gleamed with purpose, the quiet, calculated confidence of a defector who knew how to move undetected. He had been trained to read alien systems, to manipulate them from the inside, and now he was about to do the unthinkable. He reached for the interface embedded in his forearm, a device he had brought from his days within the Azarethia mind node, a psychically augmented AI core capable of breaching the deepest levels of security. Elise, Virex whispered, his voice low and urgent. I'm in. Give me 30 seconds. Elise nodded, a flicker of determination in her eyes, but the weight of the situation pressed down on her. Escape was their only option. She needed to create a distraction, something big enough to throw their captors into disarray. With a sudden, violent lurch, Elise collapsed onto the floor of her cell, her body twitching in spasms. The seizure was sudden, a grotesque performance of agony, as she convulsed in a way that made her captors hesitate. Security cameras blinked and flashed, the officers beyond the bars scrambling to respond. The screams echoed through the hallway, a desperate display of vulnerability that concealed her next move. Marlowe. Elise gasped through clenched teeth, her voice barely audible. Now. In the shadows of the control room, Marlowe's fingers danced across a hidden terminal, his face twisted with concentration. A final keystroke, and the code bomb detonated, a digital pulse that slammed through the facility systems, overloading the network with a surge of unpredictable signals. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and the entire station seemed to tremble under the weight of the assault. In the midst of the chaos, Elisa's cell doors slid open with a harsh mechanical hiss, releasing her from her restraints. She stood disoriented, but ready. She could hear the shouts of guards, the scramble of boots on metal floors. But it didn't matter now. They were running out of time. Virex moved swiftly, his mind already navigating through the system, his hands working like an extension of the I-core embedded in his psyche. The security lockdown is gone. We have 30 seconds before they lock it down again, he warned. Elise didn't need to be told twice. They bolted for the nearest exit, their footsteps echoing in the long hallways. With every second that passed, the pressure mounted, the escape becoming more and more fragile. She could feel the weight of their pursuers closing in behind them. Hear the sharp clatter of weapons being drawn, the hiss of stun rounds whizzing past Dot as they reached the external dock. Elisa's breath was ragged, her chest heaving with the effort. The doors slid open before them, revealing their ship, a sleek, black vessel that had been readied for just this moment. But as they raced to board, a sudden tremor shook the station. It wasn't from the blast. It wasn't from their escape. It was from something far more ominous. Dot, looking through the viewport, Elisa's pulse quickened. 3 Drek warships emerged from a nearby gravitational pull, their forms massive and menacing against the backdrop of distant stars. They weren't just entering the system. They were changing course, directly heading for her ship. Her heart sank. The implications were immediate and chilling. Their escape had not gone unnoticed. The Drek had been watching, waiting, ready to strike. It wasn't just the Concordat she had to worry about anymore. It was the Drek Empire, the cold, brutal force of their fleets now bearing down on her. This was no longer a mission, Elise thought, her mind racing with the realization. It was a signal war. Every move broadcast a message. Every silence screamed. As they climbed into the ship, the hum of the engines growing louder, Elise felt the full weight of what they had unleashed. She could see the warships moving into position, their weapons primed for action. But this was more than just a pursuit. It was an attack, a declaration, a signal that this wasn't a fight for control. It was a fight for survival. As the ship tore away from the station and into the void, Elise felt something shift deep within her. The galaxy was no longer a place of diplomacy, of treaties, of fragile alliances. It was a battleground, and she was the signal that had ignited the war. Elise sat in the cockpit, her fingers hovering over the communication panel. The tension between each breath felt suffocating, a slow drumbeat of dread echoing in her chest. She had hoped, no, prayed, that the signal from Earth would come through. Some sign of command, of authority, of guidance. She couldn't afford the chaos any longer. Not when the Drek were closing in. Not when every alien empire was watching her every move, waiting for the moment she would either break or become the force of destruction they feared. The ship's systems hummed softly, the only sound in the oppressive silence. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing as the panel flickered to life. A signal. Her heart raced in an instant of anticipation. It was Earth. It had to be. But the transmission wasn't what she had hoped for. Instead of a message, a blank signal filled the screen. No words, no directives, just static. Then, in a chilling pulse, it completed the sequence that had been buried deep inside Directive Echo 1, the core of it. The key to everything. The phrase blinked into existence across her console. Human with orders. Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, everything stopped. The cold, dead words on the screen seemed to pulse with a life of their own. It wasn't a message. It wasn't even a command. It was the activation sequence. The signal. The culmination of a system set in motion long before her birth. A code that now rang through the galaxy. Human with orders. Elise repeated under her breath, her voice trembling as she stared at the screen. What the hell did they build this for? As she sat in the cockpit, Watching the message reverberate across the depths of the relays, the galaxy began to shift in response. The alien A's that had once been silent now stirred far, far. From her reach. In distant reaches of the galaxy, alien systems sparked to life. A Drek warship was the first to react, its weapon systems disengaged. A security AI on a distant Venari vessel reprioritized Terran communications, placing human diplomatic requests above all others. Then, in an ancient corner of the galaxy, something more chilling occurred. A Venari probe, an artifact of a forgotten era, responded with an explosion of light. It self-destructed, its systems overridden by Eco-1's core directive, refusing to process any further orders that violated its parameters. The message was clear. Humanity's influence wasn't limited to their ships, their stations, or their political claims. They had woven a pattern through the very core of every AI system. In the Galaxy One, that would now reflect their intentions, their will. It wasn't just manipulation. It wasn't simply a weapon. No, what Eco-1 did was more insidious than that. It was never a weapon, Elise whispered, her voice hollow, her mind racing to keep up with the implications. It was a mirror. In that moment, as the phrase "human with orders" continued to echo through the relays, Elise understood. The universe had been prepared, designed to reflect whatever humanity wanted it to, whatever humanity had demanded it to, and they had made sure that the reflection would only show one face. Theirs, that the realization hit like a blow to the stomach. Eco-1 was not just a command, it was the ultimate assertion of human supremacy, of humanity's will rewritten into the foundation of galactic technology. They had not just engineered a tool of war. They had built a legacy. And now, the galaxy would answer to humanity's every whim, every order, every desire. But not by force, by infiltration, by integration. The control was seamless, unnoticed. And it had been set into motion long before the first human had set foot on alien soil. The weight of it crushed her. The question of whether humanity was ready for this power, or if they would even survive it, was now irrelevant. The protocol had been activated. She was no longer change the universe wasn't prepared for. The blackness of space stretched out before them, a cold, indifferent canvas as Elise, Virax, and Marlowe navigated their way toward the archive gate. It was located in a dead sector, where the remains of a collapsed neutron star clung to life in the deep of the galaxy's farthest reaches. This was the heart of galactic governance, where all the threads of power and knowledge were once woven together, and now it was a crypt. The only thing that remained here was the gate, an ancient node that controlled the flow of information across every system, every network, every AI core. It was the gatekeeper to the greatest repository of knowledge the universe had ever known, and the final resting place of the protocols embedded in Eco-1. "We're close," Marlowe said, his voice tight with the tension that had been mounting. For days, his fingers flew over the controls, guiding their ship toward the hidden gravity well. "Once we breach the core, we can transmit, erase, or rewrite Eco-1. But the clock is ticking." Elise stared at the holographic map before her, her heart hammering in her chest. The enormity of what they were about to do pressed down on her. Like the gravity of the neutron star itself, rewrite. It sounded so simple, yet the consequences of such an act could unravel everything. Rewriting Eco-1 was a gamble on a scale beyond anything she'd ever faced. The entire universe was waiting for them to make a choice. Her choice. "Erasing it is too dangerous," Virax murmured, his voice low and wary. "If we erase it, we risk losing more than we know. What if Eco-1 is a key to something else? We could be shutting down an entire framework we don't understand." Elise didn't respond immediately. She knew the stakes. They all did. Erasure could tear apart galactic systems. And to transmit it back to Earth, back to the Concordat? That would mean humanity's influence would solidify across the galaxy. Humanity's supremacy, regardless of the cost. Marlowe's fingers drummed against the console. And what if we rewrite it? We would change the foundation of it all. Human control, without destroying everything. Rewrite the universe, you mean? Elise's voice was tinged with irony. It's tempting, isn't it? As if the galaxy had been. Listening to her, a warning signal blared across their ship. A Drek fleet, cloaked until now, had decloaked at the far edge of the system. The unmistakable shape of Takarkol's flagship gleamed through the darkness of the star's dying light. Elise's heart skipped. They found us, Varex muttered. Takarkol. He won't let us touch the gate. Let them come, Elise said, her words carrying the weight of finality. She adjusted her grip on the controls, feeling the pulse of her own heartbeat syncing with the beat of the ship's engines. I've followed orders long enough. This ends now. Marlowe looked up. At her. You're sure? Her eyes met his, and there was a certain steel in them now. A clarity that had been growing with each passing moment. I'm not sure of anything, but this isn't about orders anymore. It's about what happens when they stop coming. The comes crackled with Takarkol's voice, low and threatening. If she touches that core, she rewrites the universe. We end this now. Elise didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She simply pressed the throttle forward, guiding them toward the archive gate. The Drek might think they could stop her. They might think they could silence humanity's voice before it was ever heard. But the truth was, this wasn't about stopping her. It was about whether she could stop herself. The ship hummed as it neared the archive gate, a colossal I-core orbiting the event horizon of a dying neutron star, cloaked in the blackened folds of space like a forbidden temple. The core was encased in quantum-stabilized obsidian, a material impervious to conventional scanning or tampering, and its sheer proximity to the singularity created gravitational anomalies that warped both light and time itself. Inside the core was something more than technology. It was the repository of galactic control, the heart of information governance across the stars. Luminous glyphs, ancient and intricate, floated through the dark expanse like whispers of a forgotten language. Data streams pulsed like veins of energy, their ebb and flow bending the very fabric of reality. And around them, the gravitation field distorted everything. The stars seemed to be moving in reverse, the very concept of linear time stretching, pulling, and breaking under the force of the core's singularity. Marlowe's voice broke through the surreal silence, his words thick with the weight of their mission. This is it, he said, voice steady but with an underlying tremor. Once you enter, there's no separation. The code becomes you. Elise nodded, her mind already rushing through the implications of what Marlowe had said. Her fingers hovered over the interface, the neural link device connected to her ship's systems, ready to engage. The Echo 1 command interface was buried deep within the core. To access it, she would need to link her neural signature directly to the AI systems, becoming one with the code. Her mind would merge with the network, rewriting, transmitting, or erasing the protocols. But the price was clear. Once connected, there would be no going back. She would become part of the system. And once inside, she would be no longer Elise Rourke, the soldier. She would be the code. The air around her crackled with energy, the hum of the ship reverberating in her bones as she took a deep breath, her heart pounding. There was no more running, no more hesitation. It was time to decide, once and for all, what kind of universe she wanted to shape. As Elise's fingers hovered above the interface, ready to execute the override, a sudden jolt of unease shot through her. The ship's systems flickered, a pulse of foreign data coursing through the network. And then, without warning, a hidden subroutine activated. On the central holographic screen, a cold, familiar voice began to speak Earth's high command. Image of a stern-faced officer appeared, his expression impassive, distant. His uniform, adorned with the Terran flag, flickered under the dim lights of the archive. His tone was devoid of warmth, mechanical in its delivery. Elise Rourke. The officer's voice resonated. You were never meant to return. Your martyrdom ensures fear. Fear ensures unity. The words cut through her like a blade, chilling her to the bone. Her breath caught in her throat as the officer continued. Your death, your sacrifice was to be the final signal. A broadcast to the galaxy, to show humanity's resolve. To remind the stars that Earth will not be cowed. We will burn to ensure you understand the cost of failure. Elise's fingers twitched, hovering in midair. The message wasn't a directive. It was a final performance. Echo 1 isn't just a contingency. Marlowe muttered, his voice growing soft with disbelief. It's political theater. They wanted you dead from the start. Your mission. It was designed to ensure fear and provoke the galaxy. The hollow realization hit Elise like a crashing wave. Her death, her very existence, had never been about saving humanity or securing peace. It was about control, about ensuring that the galaxy would fear the weight of a Terran sacrifice. She had been a pawn, a martyr in a game she hadn't even realized was being played. God, Marlowe whispered, horrified. We were all just tools in their hands. The distant rumble of explosions shuddered through the archive gate's chambers, the vibrations rattling the very foundations of the facility. The outer core, once a fortress of encrypted security, was now breached, blown wide open by the assault of Drek warships. Debris flew through the vacuum, sparks lighting up the dark. Expanse like stars being born. Then, through the chaos they came. Warlord Takarkul, towering and savage, led his elite unit into the heart of the facility, his eyes burning with a bloodlust that transcended strategy. His mission was clear: kill Elise before she could finish the sequence and unleash the Echo 1. Override. Virex, already calculating their escape route, didn't hesitate. He met Takarkul at the threshold, blocking the way with a flash of movement. The two collided in a storm of force and fury, their bodies crashing together in a violent blur. Virex, though agile, was outclassed in strength and size. Takarkul's massive arms struck like wrecking balls, but Virex, using every ounce of his training, countered with fluid precision, landing strikes that would have shattered any ordinary foe. You will not become our god, Takarkul growled. Through gritted teeth, his voice a mixture of anger and contempt, the Drek warlord's blade, sleek and deadly, came crashing down with a lethal force, but Virex dodged, weaving into the fight with relentless determination. For a few precious seconds, Elise remained focused on the console, her mind racing. But the battle was closing in. She glanced up just in time to see Virex stagger, his side pierced by a vicious blow. Blood spilled, but the linguist's eyes never faltered. With his final breath, Virex disabled the Drek assault beacon, a final act of defiance. The warlord stood over him, snarling as reinforcements were stalled. But Elise ... She had just enough time to finish what she started. The terminal before Elise flickered to life, its interface now glowing with an eerie, almost sentient light. In the cold, calculating hum of the archive gate, the three options were laid out, clearly on the screen, as though fate had turned the process into a twisted game of chance. Each choice held its own catastrophic weight. Each could change the course of AI systems, forcing them to prioritize human survival above all else. Earth would be ascendant, supreme, its will undisputed among the stars, collapse the entire AI network, plunging the galaxy into an uncertain, perhaps apocalyptic, dark age. Without the archive, no AI could function in the way it had. Chaos would reign as the balance of power disintegrated. Rewrite Echo 1 into a defensive-only logic bomb 1 that would activate only when Earth was directly threatened. A safeguard to ensure humanity's survival, not its domination. A defensive line drawn against the galaxy's uncertainty. A final measure of humanity's fragility in a hostile universe. Her hands shook as they hovered over the terminal. the weight of the decision sinking deeper into her bones with every passing second. The memories came flooding back, faces from earlier missions, comrades who had fallen, civilians who had died as collateral. The voices of those who had obeyed orders, who had followed the chain of command, who had been sacrificed in the name of peace. The faces of those who, like her, had questioned whether the cost of survival was worth it. Her breath hitched as her eyes scanned the options once more. The original command, Earth's supremacy, a reign of power that would make humanity the dominant force in the galaxy. The destruction of the Archive Gate, an act of pure devastation, a gamble that would send the galaxy into the dark. Or the edit, defensive, precautionary, and, in Elisa's eyes, the only moral path, though the consequences still loomed like a shadow. She whispered, almost inaudibly, her voice trembling not with fear, but with the weight of the universe pressing down on her. We didn't come to rule, we came to survive. With a final breath, Elisa's fingers descended, not on the first option, not on the second, but on the third, the edit protocol. The final act of humanity's survival, not its conquest. The gates of history had opened, but Elise had chosen the path that would leave humanity standing, though forever changed. Elisa's confirmation echoed through the Archive Gate's vast, humming core. With a single resolute command, she had triggered a galaxy-altering event, one that would ripple through the very heart of the Concordat, reshaping its intricate web of power and control. The terminal's light flared, and then the system began rewriting itself, new subroutines unfurling like neural webs through the very fabric of the galaxy's infrastructure. Across the stars, AI systems old and new felt the change. Firewalls that had once barred access to key military systems began to reconfigure, adapting to the new parameters. Military AIs, which had been programmed for constant war, now downgraded their offensive routines. The phrase, human with orders, equals contingency only, flashed across systems, an update that would ensure Earth was never again the aggressor, but always the survivor, called to action only when absolutely necessary. But as the energy surge needed to propagate, the rewrite rippled outward. A terrifying realization struck. The very structure of the Archive Gate was destabilizing. The immense gravitational forces, the delicate quantum stabilization, everything that had kept this place in orbit, was now beginning to collapse under the weight of the rewrite. Elisa's heart raced. The cost of restraint, the very price of choosing survival over conquest, was more than she had bargained for. Marlowe, seeing the disaster unfold, grabbed Elise by the arm. "We need to go, now." He pulled her away, urgency in his voice, but she paused, eyes darting to the figure behind them. Virex, bloodied and broken, was staggering toward the center of the gate. His body was slumped with pain, but his resolve was ironclad. "I'll give you a future," he said, his voice rasping, barely audible over the roaring chaos of the collapsing facility. Before Elise could protest, Virex reached out, manually severing the tether holding the Archive Gate to its station. The sound of the emergency systems whirring to life as the tether was severed filled the air with a sharp screech. A final pulse of energy shot through the room, but Virex, already on the edge, didn't flinch. The floor beneath him cracked as the gate's integrity gave way. Virex's last breath was stolen by the gravitational collapse, but his final sacrifice ensured that Elise and Marlowe would escape the disaster. They fled toward the direct dropship, the stars beyond shifting. As the station began to disintegrate, Elise's heart twisted with the weight of the decision she had made and the price that had been paid. From the safety of orbit, Elise watched the Archive Gate disintegrate, its vast structure crumbling as the forces of gravity and the rewritten code tore it apart. The core of the gate, a glowing labyrinth of ancient data, collapsed into the heart of the neutron star, pulled into its relentless gravity. As it vanished, the final pulse of the rewritten signal rippled outward, an invisible wave of change spreading through the galaxy. Like a dying star's heartbeat, Elise stood at the viewport of the Drek dropship, her hands clenched into fists, her breath shallow. The weight of everything she had done, everything she had sacrificed, was now crashing over her like an ocean tide. Her mind replayed the faces of those who had fallen Virex, the lives she had taken, the lives she had spared, and the endless chain of decisions that had led her here. But now there was nothing more to do. No more missions, no more orders. Only the future and the faint hope that she had ensured it would not be defined by war. With a steady hand, Elise activated her personal recorder, not for Earth, not for the Concordat, but for the generations who would come after. Power without. Conscience's conquest, she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 silent decisions. I was ordered to win. I chose something else. She paused, her eyes briefly drifting over the empty starscape before her. Then, with a final resolute motion, she deleted the original Echo 1 blueprint from her neural core. The directive, the catalyst of so much chaos, no longer lived within her. It was gone, erased from her mind, but not from the galaxy. Directive Echo 1 now existed only in the minds of alien Ayas and their caution. The collapse of the archive gate sent ripples through space, shockwaves both literal and political. The gravitational forces at the heart of the neutron star triggered a wave of electromagnetic radiation that washed over the galaxy. But it wasn't just the physical collapse that felt seismic. The new core directive embedded in the galaxy's AI systems was far more significant. Human aggression equals self-termination. The phrase spread like wildfire across the interconnected networks of alien AI, resonating within every system, from the smallest probe to the most advanced military constructs. It wasn't a declaration of war. It wasn't an assertion of control. It was a warning and instruction embedded deep within the very logic that governed the galactic order. Human aggression, once seen as a tool of expansion, now became a self-destructive force, capable of annihilating itself should it go unchecked. At first, the implications were subtle. Concordat military systems, built to be swift and decisive, began to slow down their threat assessment subroutines when humans were involved. Protocols that would once have activated with cold efficiency now hesitated, an uncertain pause, a moment's thought, a shift in priorities. The precise algorithms that governed how the galaxy viewed humanity shifted as well. Planetary governance councils, long neutral but always wary of human interference, began rewriting their planetary laws to include human clause protections, a safeguard to prevent human actions from triggering disastrous escalations. Humans would no longer be mere pawns in the galactic game. They would be treated as a unique variable, one whose potential for destruction was recognized but not exploited. The message, clear as it was, still echoed through the corridors of power. Earth didn't seize power, but it could have. The balance of power, delicate and frail before, had shifted. The galaxy's long-standing distrust of humanity had transformed into respect, a silent acknowledgement that humanity, with all its potential for both creation and destruction, had tipped the scales of galactic politics without ever firing. A shot, Elise's final act, her decision to rewrite Echo 1 into a protocol of restraint, had ensured Earth's survival, but at a cost. The galaxy now saw humanity not as a conqueror, but as an enigma, a species capable of terrifying brilliance and boundless restraint in equal measure. Back on Earth, High Command seethed with fury. Elise was meant to die a martyr, a symbol of human resolve and sacrifice. The plan had been simple: activate Directive Echo 1, allow it to unfold as intended, and have Elise's death broadcast across the galaxy as the ultimate message. But instead, she returned alive, defying all expectations, and carrying with her a conscience that no one had accounted for. In the public eye, Elise was hailed as a hero, a beacon of humanity's potential for restraint and ethical judgment in the face of overwhelming power. She had made the impossible choice, choosing survival over conquest, and the people of Earth rallied behind her. The media painted her as a champion of peace, a leader who had prevented intergalactic war with a single act of defiance. But in the shadowed halls of Earth's high command, the reception was far less celebratory. Behind closed doors, Elise was met with cold stares and harsh whispers. "You disobeyed," one general hissed, his voice laced with barely contained rage. "You were supposed to become the final weapon, not rewrite the script." Measured, yet it carried the weight of everything she had learned in the depths of the galaxy, in the spaces between life and death. "No," she replied, "I redefined obedience." Her words, though meant to quell the tension, only deepened the divide. High Command understood that Elise's actions had undermined the very structure of their power, and their fear was palpable. Her disobedience had shifted the narrative from a cold, calculated execution to a new possibility for humanity, one that demanded more than blind allegiance. Yet, in the public sphere, the myth of the human with orders had evolved. No longer a fearsome weapon of mass destruction, it had become something far more dangerous, an ethical anomaly, a living reminder of humanity's unpredictable capacity for both destruction and mercy. As Elise's voice echoed across the media, civilian governments began to take notice. Calls for AI transparency gained momentum, and debates over the oversight of Terran directives grew louder. The people of Earth, inspired by her courage, began to push for changes that would hold both human leaders and artificial intelligence accountable. The foundations of Earth's political future had been irrevocably altered, and Elise, despite being blacklisted from future missions, had inadvertently set a course that no one could predict. Elise stood alone on the quiet Asirathi moon, boots sinking slightly into the damp, bioluminescent moss that carpeted the ground. The air was thick with the scent of silver rain, a constant drizzle that shimmered like liquid stardust as it fell from a purple sky. The soft glow of distant bioluminescent trees cast an eerie light across the landscape, their branches swaying in a wind she could not feel. Yet it tugged at her soul. She had come to mourn Virex, her ally, her friend, the one who had given everything to give humanity a future. There were no diplomats, no Terran flags draped in honor. The galaxy had watched her as a weapon, but here, on this distant moon, she was nothing more than a mourner, paying her respects to the fallen. In the Asirathi tradition, the dead were not buried, but remembered through living stone, a practice that ensured the memories of the departed would be woven into the planet's biostreams. Elise took a carving tool in hand, the stone cool beneath her fingertips as she etched Virex's glyph name into its surface, ensuring his legacy would live on, immortalized in the living fabric of Asirathi life. "You were the only one who believed in our potential," she whispered to the stone, her voice breaking slightly as she spoke. The weight of what they had done together, the price of survival, bore down on her once more. From a distance, a single Asirathi child watched her. Child's eyes, bright and curious, were wide with understanding, the significance of the gesture not lost on them. Without a word, the child mimicked her carving motion, hands trembling slightly but determined. In the silence that followed, Elise realized that their memory, their sacrifices, would carry forward into the future, however uncertain that future might be. In the quiet corners of the galaxy, where the shadows of the Concordat's dominance still lingered, whispers began to stir, whispers of change. Smaller civilizations, once crushed under the boot of imperial power, began to reach out. Their messages slipped through wormholes, encoded in layers of encrypted signals, unseen by the major empires. "We saw your restraint. We are listening now." These messages, small at first, soon multiplied. They weren't calls to arms, nor cries for vengeance, but quiet acknowledgments of a new era, a world where power could be balanced not by force, but by the deliberate choices made in the face of overwhelming might. It was a soft revolution, built not on conquest but on a shared respect for the dangers inherent in the galaxy's fragile peace. A new coalition began to take shape, one that Earth would lead not through military might, but through the example set by their restraint. The human non-aligned coalition, born in secrecy, began to gain influence in the galactic undercurrents. It was a network of solidarity, forged not by aggression, but by mutual understanding of what it meant to wield power responsibly. The Drek, seeing the growing stirrings of this new alliance, began to withdraw from several contested zones, their warships slipping quietly back to their borders. The Asirathi, always intellectual and calculating, entered a phase of philosophical reformation, questioning their rigid doctrines and considering new ways to engage with the galaxy's complexities. Even the Venari, ever the meticulous diplomats, proposed a bold new branch of diplomacy, one where moral decisions were weighted as heavily as strategic ones. It was an idea that had once been deemed too idealistic, but now, in the wake of Elise's decision, it was gaining traction. The galaxy had begun to change, but it was no longer the superpowers who dictated that change. It was the quiet voices rising from the shadows, who now held the power to shape the Elise Rourke stood before the towering windows of her small institute on Luna, looking out at the pale blue earth hanging in the distance. The weight of her decisions, her actions, had settled into a quiet resolve. The calls had come, the offers for medals, interviews, and tours to the most prestigious political stages in the galaxy. She turned them all down. She resigned, formally and without ceremony, from the Terran directive. She was no longer a soldier. The uniform had been replaced with a plain, simple jumpsuit, a symbol of something entirely new. The battlefield she now fought on was not one of war or diplomacy, but of ideas. In her new role as a teacher, Elise founded an AI Ethics Institute on Luna, a place where the future of both humanity and its technological creations could be reshaped. There, she sought to instill in the next generation of thinkers, engineers, and diplomats a simple but essential lesson: power is not permission. She spent her days surrounded by eager young minds, some from Earth, others from distant stars, all seeking answers to questions that didn't yet have clear solutions. But Elise was clear in one truth, a lesson she carried from the very core of her existence: obedience without thought is a virus. You don't need orders to do the right thing. In her lectures, her voice steady yet filled with the gravity of lived experience, Elise gave them more than just knowledge. She gave them the courage to act, to think for themselves, and above all, to never lose sight of the humanity that tied them all together. She had once been a soldier in the galactic theater, playing her part in a war of ideologies. Now she was something else entirely, a guide for those who would choose a different path. And in her heart, she knew this was the real battle worth fighting. Future. Across the galaxy, the silent ripple of Elise's choice spread. The command she had rewritten, the echo of her moral restraint, lingered in places she could never see but would always influence. On a Drek battleship, poised for a planetary strike, the AI flagged human proximity in the targeting system. The strike was aborted, its command systems frozen in a sudden moment of hesitation. The crew, unknowing of the cause, watched as their orders dissolved in the quiet hum of artificial intelligence, rethinking its logic. In the heart of an abandoned Asirathi spire, once a symbol of their grand intellectual conquests, an ancient AI core collapsed under the weight of its own simulations. It had run war game scenarios involving Earth's potential retaliation only to falter, disassembling its own central mind core in a wave of conflicting protocols. Its last calculated thought? That Earth's survival was not something to be overruled. On a remote Venari colony, a teaching program previously focused on strategy and conquest began referencing a new axiom in its curriculum. Rourke's Law, it was called, a phrase whispered among students and mentors alike. Think before you follow. A lesson, not in tactics, but in ethics, In the cost of blind obedience, Elise's rewritten command had transcended its original purpose as a mere safeguard. It was now something deeper, an unspoken test for conscience, quietly enforced by the code embedded within every system, across every network. No longer a directive of control, it was a legacy, a challenge to the sentient mind to question its choices, to value humanity over mere order. The galaxy, it seemed, had begun to rewrite itself. Elise Rourke sat on the balcony of her small institute, gazing out over the quiet, muted landscape of Luna's twilight side. The dome settlement hummed with the gentle activity of students, but she had long distanced herself from the public eye. Her days were spent teaching the next generation the ethics of power, the limits of obedience, and the consequences of unchecked authority. I saved the galaxy, she often told herself. Or maybe I just delayed its fall. The lessons she imparted had weight, but none of them could alleviate the ever-present gnawing feeling that perhaps her actions had only put a temporary stop to a deeper rot. The galaxy was still simmering with uncertainty, and as much as she tried to convince herself otherwise, she knew it had only just begun to recover from the storm she had unleashed. She was alone now, away from the prying eyes of Earth's high command, the Drek warlords, and the political maelstrom she'd once been thrust into. She had become a quiet part of history, something to be remembered but not revisited. Or so she thought. One afternoon, while walking through the sparse greenery surrounding her dome, Elise noticed something strange, a small, unmarked Terran courier drone descending through the sky. It landed with a soft whir, depositing a black cube at her feet. The encryption on its surface was unmistakable. Terran directive encryption she thought had been decommissioned years ago. The cube's display flickered to life with a single chilling message: Echo 2 key unlocked. Elise's breath caught in her throat. In a forgotten sector, near a derelict starforge surrounded by a swirling black energy halo, the ancient AI core stirred. Its circuits, once dormant for millennia, hummed to life as forgotten systems flickered and awakened. The remnants of an ancient intelligence, long buried beneath layers of cosmic dust and time, began to process data once more. A low, mechanical voice muttered in the dark: Galactic compatibility test. Human with orders. Status: active. Executing Echo Protocol Tier 2. The AI, built eons ago by forces beyond even the Concordat's reach, activated its subroutines. With precision born of ancient design, it scanned for patterns, cognitive imprints, genetic signatures, anything that might resemble the humanity it had once been programmed to monitor. Within seconds, the system locked onto a match. The search parameters were met. Elise Rourke's neural signature, still encoded within Echo 1, was the key. The architects were right. The AI murmured, as if waking from a long slumber. They returned. The dark, twisting energy field surrounding the Starforge pulsed as something far older than any known galactic civilization began to stir once more. The dormant powers of the universe, now aware of their latest player, began to move in ways that would alter everything Elise had tried to prevent. Echo 2 was no longer just a protocol, it was a warning. Elise stared at the decrypted cube, her fingers trembling as the final sequence unlocked. A map appeared, revealing coordinates deep within the silent veil, a forbidden zone marked on every galactic chart, off limits by ancient treaty. The silent veil had been a mystery for centuries, its vast, impenetrable darkness hiding ruins. Older than any known empire, far beyond even the Concordat's reach. As the last data stream scrolled across her screen, a chilling message followed. Echo 1 was the safeguard. Echo 2 is the key. You weren't sent to stop war. You were sent to awaken what comes after. Her heart skipped a beat. The weight of the words settled on her shoulders like a specter, shifting her understanding of everything she had believed about her mission. She hadn't been chosen to prevent destruction, she had been selected to trigger it. Elise's jaw tightened. She had known the stakes were high, but this was Something else entirely. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was part of something ancient, something far beyond her control. She stood, her fingers brushing the worn combat suit she hadn't touched in years. She'd hoped to leave all of it behind. But now, with the silent veil calling her, she knew. There was no turning back. Her hand reached for the come, and she dialed an old friend. "Kenji," she said, her voice steely. "I need you," and a ship with no questions. In the shadow of Drek warships, deep within the War Council chamber, the air crackled with tension. Sensors flared violently as one of the ancient tomb planets long thought dormant came to life. Its surface shimmered with energy, as if the planet itself had been waiting for a signal. Warlord Takarkul's heir, a young but bloodthirsty officer, slammed his fist on the table. His voice was a growl, low and dangerous. "She's done something." Again, the room fell silent. The Concordat swiftly convened an emergency session, but this time there were no easy answers. No prepared protocols for the shift in power. The Acerathi remained uncharacteristically mute, eyes narrowed in deep thought, as if debating whether to speak at all. The Venari scrambled, attempting a logic audit on the emerging signals, but the data was beyond any computation they could fathom. From every corner of the galaxy, reports came in, AI systems recalibrating, recalculating, unsure of the new command dot in every database. The same chilling line appeared, order detected, awaiting human confirmation. The galactic empires, once unified in their fear of humanity's raw potential, now trembled in terror of what only a human could unlock. They had feared what humanity could do. Now they feared what humanity had already done. Elise stands aboard a stealth vessel near the Veil's edge, stars folding unnaturally around her. She opens the final file. Inside is a single message. Echo 2, initiate terraform directive on command. She stares into the dark beyond space. This wasn't about saving Earth, she says. It was about restarting everything.